In this video, I'm going to show you 2 hacks that billion-dollar elite negotiators use to negotiate effectively and to be able to consistently close 8 to 9 figure deals. Now, what I'm about to show you in this video are things that we have actually implemented with some of the world's biggest companies like Adidas, Pfizer, IBM, John Deere, Vodafone, Nokia. We've basically used this exact same system that I'm about to explain to you, and we've trained more than 12,500 sales and procurement professionals over the last 20 years based on these exact systems, so you can just copy and paste it. So the very first thing that you need to understand, which a lot of people get wrong, is they think that negotiation is an event. It's something that you just go to a meeting, you go to a negotiation, you talk to the counterpart, and you think that, okay, we need to get to terms, and then you want to walk away with a deal. That is probably the worst thing that you can do going into negotiation. Negotiation is a system, and around negotiation, the most important thing that you need to understand is the concept of human behavior. Because the better you can understand human behavior, the better you will be able to negotiate. So, when we do training with sales and procurement professionals, you need to understand that there are 3 things that basically makes or breaks a human's behavior. Okay, it's number 1, the experience of that specific individual. Number 2, the ability or the skills of that individual. And then number 3, the preferences of that specific individual or team. So let's quickly talk about each one of them. When it comes to experience, you can obviously just think to yourself, having certain amount of experience is definitely going to influence your behavior in a specific scenario. If you have a lot of experience in a specific niche, solving a specific problem, and you go to a negotiation, you are going to bring that experience to the table, and that is going to influence how you behave during that negotiation. So experience definitely plays a role. Number 2 is ability and skills. Obviously, the more you do something, the better you become at it, and if you do it long enough, you become a specialist at that. So your ability and your skills also influences your behavior, and the same for your counterparts, right? Their ability and their skills will influence their behavior during a negotiation. Now, what most people miss is that we all as individuals have preferences. Although we have experience and skills, we also have preferences. Some of us only like to eat meat, some of us only like to eat vegetables, some of us like a black car, some of us like a white car. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what you need to understand is that preferences is making up between 60 to 70% of a human's behavior during high stakes negotiations. And if you don't understand what your counterpart has as preference or what the team's got as a preference, then you're already starting on the back foot. Okay? So the number 1 thing to understand about human behavior is what are the preferences of that team or of that individual. And we'll talk about how we get to that just now. But to put it in very simple layman's terms, you can just imagine if we did not have any preferences and we only relied on our experience, on our ability and on our skills and what the experts out there say we must do, then we would all be going to the gym for at least an hour a day. We'll all wake up at 5 a.m. and meditate and do a cold plunge and a shower and a this and a that. And we'll all stick to speed limits on the road, hopefully you do. And we'll all always brush our teeth in the morning and the evening. And we'll do all these things, right? And we'll all eat our vegetables every day. 5 colors and. But because we have preferences, those are the things that are not happening because we have certain preferences. And you have to keep this in mind when you go into negotiating with someone, because when you understand what tickles them and what makes them have a certain preference, then you're starting on the front foot. So now the question is, how the hell do we figure out what is someone's preference? For yourself and your team that is negotiating, that is important, but it's also important to know what is the preference of the counterparts, of the opposition sitting across the table from you, trying to close a deal or trying to negotiate some rates. Now there are 2 basically profiles, screening profiles, that I would strongly suggest that you go and do. And like I've said, we always do this as a start when we train sales and procurement teams. The very first thing that we do with them is this hack. Okay? And we've been dealing with deals of more than $4 billion in total in the last 10 years. And it always comes back to these 2 profiles. The very first one is what we call the NBI profile, the Needling Brain Instrument profile. And the second one is what we call the TKI profile, or the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument. Okay, long words. Now, what do these two profiles do? Firstly, they have completely different outlooks on what they are profiling. Okay, so they give you two different things. So if you're going to put someone through these two profiles, you need to know what to look for in your team and in the member of your team. So when we look at the NBI profile, it basically reveals how you prefer to think, how you prefer to communicate, how you prefer to learn, solve problems, and how you make decisions as an individual. Okay, so it's more about you or your team member compared to how the opposition is going to react. That's what the NBI profile tells you. Now, obviously, the purpose of the profiling is so that you know what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths. Because if you know what you're going for and you know what you want, but you know what you're struggling with as a weakness, then you can prepare for that accordingly. But if you don't even know what your weaknesses are and you go into a high-stakes negotiation and you haven't prepared properly, then you're starting on the back foot again, right? So the NBI profile is basically, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that we look at when we look at an NBI profile. And you can go do this online. I'll put the link in the description below the video. But number one is understanding others. So it increases your awareness of and the sensitivity to the thinking preferences of others, fostering better relationships and team dynamics. And as you can imagine, that is super important, right? If you're a team player and you help the team get through to a negotiation and close a deal, you need to understand how others think and how they operate, not just the opposition, but also in your own team, so that you guys work together. Then it also looks at team development. It helps develop more effective teams by understanding the unique thinking preferences, the communication styles, and also conflict resolution approaches of individuals, okay? Then conflict resolution. It provides insight into how to resolve conflicts by understanding different thinking processes involved. There's leadership and creativity. I'm not going to go too much into detail here. There's leadership and creativity. It helps improve leadership and creativity in a business or professional context. And then there's identifying negativity, which is super important for negotiation. So a separate negativity instrument can pinpoint specific thinking processes that can cause negativity, potentially blocking happiness and success. If you've got a negative thinking team member in your team and you guys are going into negotiation, then you have someone in the team that might potentially cost you that contract or mandate or deal. Okay, that's what the NBI profiling is going to give you. You can see it's slightly more focused on the individual themselves. Now, the TKI profiling, the Thomas Kielman conflict mode instrument, is a little bit more about conflict resolution. Because if you think about it, when you go into a negotiation, the thing that you are basically doing, stepping into that, is conflict resolution. Sometimes really bad, sometimes it doesn't even feel like it's conflict, it's just that we're there to close the deal and get to terms, right? But 90% of the time, you need to understand, what conflict mode do you need to be in and what handling technique do you need to use during a negotiation. So the TKI profile, identification of your conflict styles, we'll talk about that just now, but the profile shows your scores on the 5 conflict handling modes, ranked in descending order from most used to least used style. And if you can identify what your conflict resolution styles are, then you know what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are. And hopefully you can put a team together then that the weaknesses start to the strengths start to outplay the weaknesses, right? So every team member has got their strengths, and you want to try and assemble a team where everyone brings something else to the table so that you've got a strong team of A players. That's what makes this TKI profiling absolutely incredible. Then also understanding of your approach to conflict. You learn whether you tend to be more assertive or cooperative, or a mix of both when dealing with conflict. So are you more assertive or are you more cooperative? Like, are you aggressive or do you actually cooperate with what is busy going on? The awareness of overuse or underuse. So the profile also helps you to see if you're habitually relying on certain modes too much or neglecting others. A common language for conflict. The TKI provides a shared vocabulary to discuss conflict openly and productively within a team or organization. Again, I'm not going to bore you with the details here. And then guidance for effective conflict management. That is super important. This last one is really important. So by understanding your patterns, you can learn to choose the most appropriate mode for any given conflict, leading to more positive outcomes. Now stick with me through this video, because I'm going to show you how to apply this practically, and how people that consistently close 8 to 9 figure deals do this, and why these two profiles are so important. These are 2 really great hacks. So let's move deeper into the TKI profile. And again, I'll put the link if you want to go do a TKI profile. I'll put the link below. You're more than welcome to go and do that. But essentially, you can see the TKI profile gives you 5 conflict handling modes. That is what it focuses on. It tells you if you are in conflict, how are you going to operate? Are you going to be assertive or cooperative, or what are you going to do? And you need to know what that is. So the 5 conflict handling modes are essentially the following. It's competing, it's collaborating, it's compromising, it's avoiding, and it is accommodating. Okay? Every one of us have these certain conflict handling modes as strengths and weaknesses. Okay? And you'll see that if you do the TKR profiling, they will put them in order of priority for you. The ones that you use the most and the ones that you use the least. But a really good negotiator, okay, and please make sure you listen to this. A really good negotiator knows when to jump between these handling techniques. And that is why it's so important for you to understand them and know how to practically use them during negotiations. Okay? So if we look at a competing way of doing things, okay, that means that we are assertive and uncooperative. So let me give you a scenario for each of these. So the very first one is a competing conflict handling technique. So here's a scenario for you. So let's take a pharmaceutical company negotiating exclusive drug distribution rights with a government. It's exclusive drug distribution rights with government. Okay, what is the application of the competing handling technique? The pharma firm knows that it has the only approved treatment on the market, and therefore they refuse to concede on exclusivity or pricing. They use it as a take it or leave it stance. Why? Because they are the only approved treatment, so they can go for the competing handling technique. They don't have to go in and just be cooperative or just be collaborative or give in to a lot of concessions. They can walk in, make their stance and say, this is what we want, this is what we price it at, and you have to take it or leave it. That is a competing handling technique. So why? In high stakes negotiations where you hold a monopoly or you have a clear power advantage, competing ensures maximum gain while also protecting strategic control without giving in. Okay, that's the competing one. So as you can see, when you've got exclusivity or when you're in a deal and you know that there aren't any other players in the room that's going to compete with you, then you can use the competing conflict handling technique. The second one is collaborating. Okay, this means that you are assertive and also cooperative at the same time during the negotiation. Now, a scenario here would be, if you want to follow, I'm reading there, the scenario here would be a joint venture between 2 global tech companies to develop a new AI platform. So there's 2 tech companies doing a joint venture. Okay, obviously that already tells you that it should be a collaboration. Now the application here is both sides push hard for their priorities like data ownership, IP rights, brand exposure, but openly share information and work to co-create a structure that maximizes innovation and profit. So in this case, we want to come to the negotiation with a collaborative mindset. So you preferably want to bring your team members in your negotiation team they must have strengths as the collaborating handling technique. Okay? You do not want to bring someone with a competing or a avoiding handling technique in this scenario. Then you've got trouble. So why is this collaborating handling technique working? It works when there's long-term value creation, number 1. There's trust, number 2, and ongoing partnership that matters more than the short-term wins. Okay, so we're looking long-term, and therefore we're going collaborating handling technique. Then there's the compromising one. A scenario here is where there's a union and an airline management team negotiating pilot salaries before a strike deadline. So the application here would be both sides agree to a temporary wage increase and a future review, splitting the difference to avoid immediate shutdowns. So in this case, obviously the airline knows that, when the pilots are going to go on strike, then they're going to be burning through money every single hour of every single day until they've resolved this issue. So then it's better to bend the knee a little bit and weigh up the cost of having the aeroplane standing and the pilot striking versus giving them a slight increase for the short term and then figuring out what are we going to do later. That is compromising. And then obviously they expect of the union to compromise a little bit as well and not push for the increase they wanted initially, but a slightly lower increase in salaries. Okay, so why do we use this handling technique? Compromise is effective under time pressure where neither side can afford a stalemate, but collaboration isn't feasible. Okay, then the avoiding one. This is a tough one. Okay, the avoiding one. Here's a scenario. We have 2 large defense contractors bidding for a government contract they get into a heated side dispute over a minor subcontractor's role. Okay, so these guys are not going head to head. No one is happy. It's avoiding certain things. They're unassertive, they're uncooperative, they just can't find common ground. Okay, The application here would be, rather than derail the billion-dollar main contract with petty disputes, both firms table the issue and then they let time or third parties resolve it at a later stage. Okay, so why do we use this? Avoidance prevents escalation when the issue is low priority compared to the bigger stakes at play. So here you want to keep the bigger picture in mind, okay? And you want to avoid talking about the small things that is holding the whole project back. That is the avoidance handling technique, or avoidance handling technique. Then the accommodating one, this is when you are unassertive but cooperative. So here is an example where, so this is typically where, you know, the opposition has got a little bit more leverage than you, and you basically have to give in to be able to, you know, see the big picture. So a scenario here would be a luxury hotel chain negotiating with a celebrity brand ambassador for a multi-year endorsement deal. The application of this type of negotiating, where you are accommodating, in this case, is the hotel concedes on minor perks for this specific deal. It's where the celebrity is getting suite upgrades, they're getting private jet access, because securing the celebrity's name brings massive brand prestige. So the hotel had to decide, well, is it worth it for us to give in and bend a knee and give this person hotel suite upgrades for free and give them access to the private jet of the hotel group? And in this scenario, yes, it was, because they saw that the upside of the name attached to the hotel brand, the celebrity name attached to the hotel brand, outweighs the fact that they're giving the celebrity free upgrades and access to the private jet. So why are we using this? Accommodation builds goodwill and locks in a deal where the biggest strategic gain outweighs small concessions. And that's the five, those are the 5 types of conflict handling modes. And like I've said, if you are a good negotiator, you can go between these. So as a summary, what you need to understand here is that negotiation always comes down to behavior. If you know what your counterparts want, you can go into the negotiation, you can even simulate before what you think is going to happen, and then you can understand that their preferences is going to be basically influencing their behavior like 70% on the weight scale. Okay, and if you've got your 2 profiles done, your NBI profile and your TKI profile, and your team's got their profiles done, then you can assemble a team to go into the negotiation and really apply best practices, knowing what the strengths and the weaknesses of each of the team members are. Okay, now like I've said to you, these are the companies that we've worked with: Adidas, Nokia, Vodafone, DIF, NHS, Altana, Victrex. We've worked with, you know, Fortune 500 companies, massive enterprises, and we've trained more than 12,500 sales and procurement professionals. And this is the number one thing that it comes down to. This is the very first thing that we start with, is the profiling and how you use conflict handling modes in high stakes negotiations to your advantage by knowing what the preferences are of the behavior of your opponents. Okay, so this is really a drop in the bucket of, you know, being an elite negotiator and being able to close 8 to 9, you know, figure deals consistently. If you found this helpful, then I mean, what you can do is below this video there will be a link. What we're actually doing is we're running a few free simulation calls this month, and you can book in a free simulation call for yourself or your team. And typically what we do on these simulation calls is we jump into a case study simulation. We negotiate a little bit with you. It's a very fun thing to do. And then afterwards, you actually get a report to see where you've lost margin, where you could have, you know, done better with anchoring or framing, which are the 5 conflict handling modes that you've leaned towards too much, or which ones that you're not use enough. So it's a 20-minute session. It's free. There's no lock-in periods or any credit card details that we need from you. And then we just jump on a simulation and we can show you where you're possibly leaking margin and how we can add value. So if you found this video helpful, click the link, book in a free simulation with us, and this is really just a drop in the bucket of the things that we can bring to you.